Greetings and welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you could be here. Before we begin, please remember this. If you enjoy this content, please consider hitting that like button, dropping a comment, sharing this video with a friend, and subscribing if you haven't done so already. Now, on with the story. The Deathworlders by Philip R. Johnson, aka Hambone, Hambone HFY, and Hambone 3110. Chapter 19. Baptisms, Part 3. Date point: 4 years, 9 months, 1 week, 2 days after Vancouver. HMS Caledonia, orbiting planet Gorai, Gowan space. Regaari.
Human Starship Caledonia, this is Whitecrest Clan Personal Transport 337, requesting permission to approach and dock.
Copy 337, hold distance and stand by. There was a long pause before the human flight controller's voice returned. Whitecrest 337, please state your business.
Caledonia, I am a personal envoy of Mother Supreme Giamai. My mission is a diplomatic one. I have no cargo or passengers, and this vessel is unarmed.
Again, a long wait. Finally, his anticipation was rewarded. Whitecrest 337, power down your engines and shields and prepare to be tugged into our port flight deck. Complying. Anybody else would have probably felt that the humans were being paranoid, but Regaari knew there was no such thing. In a way, their caution was comforting. It was like being surrounded by the terse professionalism of his own clan. He was met on the deck by a squad of male soldiers and a female in a more comfortable dark blue uniform with some kind of rank marking worn on her chest. The former watched him like a hawk as he alighted, clearly alert for danger and unwilling to relax even though he was plainly unarmed. He approved. The latter, however, held out 2 pieces of equipment. One was plainly a translator device, which she handed to him. The other was a flat paddle of some kind.
I'm subjecting you to a quick search, she informed him.
Regaari ducked his head in acknowledgement and then stood with his arms and legs outstretched. Curiously, she began with his head, grunting as the wand beeped. It beeped a few more times as she ran it over him. Wherever it passed over a metal fastening on his coverall, but she seemed to find that acceptable. You have neural implants, she said. It may have been a question, but Regaari didn't detect the uptick at the end of her sentence that was characteristic of the way Xiu had asked questions, and which he assumed to be a standard human vocalization. Yes, he confirmed, wondering where she was going with this statement.
So long as you're aboard this ship, you will remain under Marine escort. These are for your protection as much as anybody else's. This is a working warship, and we don't want you getting lost or injured, the officer informed him in an apparent non sequitur. Gravity in sections of the ship you'll be visiting has been turned down, but you could seriously hurt yourself if you stray outside of these areas.
Thank you, he said, agreeing that the escort seemed safest. The officer relaxed and extended a hand, shaking Regaari's paw with the human's trademark firm grip, but not with their equally trademark crushing power.
Welcome aboard. I'm Lieutenant Ellen McDaniel, the ship's first lieutenant. Captain Bedini apologizes for not meeting you in person. You've come highly recommended, but he does have a ship to run.
Thank you, he repeated. I completely understand.
Will you come this way, please?
McDaniel gestured towards a hatch with one hand. The ship was not originally of human construction, Regaari could tell. There was a clear mismatch. The human technology was like stepping into a museum. It was all sturdy metal painted a dull and hard-wearing gray, with visible and almost shockingly low-tech dials and physical controls. The sturdy bulkheads had been installed, lined with easily accessible pipes, power lines, and conduits, everyone festooned with bright warning lights, simple diagrams demonstrating their use, and terse blocks of text. Visible below all of that functional steel, however, was something altogether more ornate and elegant. The corridors seemed to be surprisingly wide and tall, as if built for the galactic average, which was decidedly at odds with the small, narrow pressure doors that had been spliced into it at regular intervals. The deck plating was totally standard, the product of any shipyard in the interspecies dominion. The firefighting systems in the ceiling, on the other hand, had clearly been ripped out and replaced for some reason. The bit that really surprised him, however, was that every last scrap of electronics had been replaced. There wasn't a single recognizable wall screen, processing unit, terminal, or display to be seen. The humans couldn't possibly have computers that were on par with those of a more established spacefaring civilization, could they? McDaniel made a familiar, amused noise. A lot of her mannerisms were much like Xiu's, though possibly that was just because she was fellow human female. She was, after all, only the second such that Regaari had ever met. But there was also a lot different from her than Xiu. McDaniel marched, moving in an efficient, brisk pace that Regaari could feel in the deck. Xiu had always glided, disarmingly soft and silent. Xiu's head fur had been long, shiny, and dark black. McDaniel's was much shorter, and of a kind of matte yellowish hue that Regaari couldn't remember ever seeing in Gowan fur, and where Xiu had gone everywhere with her head bowed a little and hunched inwards, making herself small, McDaniel moved like she owned the place, and to judge from the deference shown to her by the ship's crew, she very nearly did. "Impressed?" she asked. "Intrigued," Regaari admitted, conscious that while everything he spoke and heard was reaching him in perfect Gowan, the human would be hearing them in English, thanks to the targeted interfering sound waves the device was emitting. The effect had always disconcerted him. "You've clearly taken somebody else's ship and reworked it to your needs, but I don't recognize the design." "I can't discuss the details," McDaniels told him, "but yes, the ship was captured and repurposed. A large part of its internal systems are back on Earth now, being reverse-engineered." Regaari glanced around. It was hard to gauge the level of advancement that the ship had originally been built at thanks to the human replacements, but he got the impression that it had originally matched or likely exceeded the very cutting edge of Gowan hardware. Earth had achieved impressive results with just a few mangled scraps of Hunter technology. He wondered what they would achieve with these new intact trophies. One thing he did notice was that it was eerily quiet. A warship this size should have been permeated by the background hum of its power cords. On Caledonia, the sound came from the crew and the air systems, neither of which were loud. After they had gone down a flight or two of extremely steep stairs, almost ladders really, McDaniel opened a hatch and politely gestured him into a meeting room of some description, where he sat down. The chairs were a little awkwardly shaped for a human, leaving his feet extended outwards well above the ground, and sliding his hips forward so as to bend his knees comfortably only induced an uncomfortable bend in his spine. He eventually settled for swiveling the chair to a quarter turn and sitting on it sideways. The Marines had waited outside. "So, to business then," McDaniel said. "Would you like some coffee? How does caffeine affect your species?" "I don't know," Regaari confessed. "I don't know what that is." "Probably best not, then," McDaniel said ruefully. "You don't mind if I have a cup, do you?" "Not at all." McDaniel opened a thermal flask, and a strong scent assailed Regaari's nose as she poured out a steaming blackish-brown liquid. It smelled quite nice, he decided, but it also promised that the substance itself probably wouldn't taste as good as it smelled. At least not to him. McDaniel sipped it and seemed very pleased with the result. Then she set the cup aside. "So, your diplomatic assignment." "A plea. One of our own has gone missing. One of your own, too." "I don't follow." Regaari scratched behind his ear. "How much do you know about our clan of females?" he asked. McDaniel shrugged. "Less than I would like to before drawing any conclusions," she said. "They're certainly, no offense intended, the most powerful of your clans by dint of sheer population, and control over the breeding rights, but I can't say I know much more than that." "Well, one thing you may not appreciate is that you don't necessarily have to be Gowan to be part of a clan," Regaari told her, "though that precedent was actually set by a human." "Really?" McDaniel looked intrigued. "Oh, yes. She saved a colony ship of mothers, sisters, and cubs from an illicit Cortai science facility some 5 homeworld years ago, before your species' first faster-than-light flight. She couldn't go home. We didn't even know where Earth was at the time. So the females declared her one of their own and took her in. She's officially a sister. And she's gone missing." "That's right. I think in your terms, I last saw her just 2 years ago." "You last saw her." Regaari ducked his head, ears rotating slightly. "Xiu is a friend," he confessed. "I was tasked with looking after her and did so for more than a year." "Xiu?" "Her name is just impossible for Gowans to produce correctly. Xiu Chang is the closest I can get." "And she just vanished?" "I think I had better tell you the whole story from the start," Regaari told her. Some minutes later, his account was briefly interrupted when a junior of some description arrived and handed McDaniel a hard copy file, little more than a brown folder and a few sheets of paper. But the face looking out from the first of those pieces of paper was definitely Xiu, albeit looking younger, a little rounder in the face and a little less stressed than Regaari remembered her. "Xiu Chang," she said, almost mispronouncing the name slightly, making it sound like Jew. "Abducted from... Vancouver. 3 days before the Hunter attack there. Turned 24 last month. Was studying acting at UBC at the time of her abduction. Last known sighting nearly 2 years ago. Pretty much a full year before the abductee reclamation program really swung into gear. Aboard a private corporate cargo relay station." "That station was handling hundreds of ships a day," Regaari said. "By the time we woke up and found her missing, dozens had come and gone. She could have been on any of them. And from there..." He made a helpless gesture, ears downcast. "I'm the one who taught her how to cover her tracks. Apparently, she was a good student." "It says here she's known to have been wounded by a nerve jam pulse," McDaniel said. "Yes, it very nearly killed her." "That's good bad news. At least it didn't kill her, but those weapons have some terrible long-term effects. How did it happen?" "Well, as I was saying, we were having a tough fight of it." Date point: 4 years, 9 months, 1 week, 2 days, AV. Starship Sanctuary. Docked at Free Trade Station 1090. Enlist possibility. The Merworkwell system. The signal stars. Kirk. Zane's dense patois, fortunately, was handled perfectly well by the translator, though only after Lewis was instructed to reprogram it. Apparently Zane didn't approve of having his own Creole echoed back at him. It certainly made conversation much easier. "So where did she go?" "Flight deck 404. I nearly didn't find it," Lewis snickered. "We got really lucky there. These things only log the deck plating power draw about every half hour, but the last log was on that deck, and the flight log and itinerary for a light bulk transport headed for the Aru system. Departure time 5 minutes after that deck plate log."
"The Aru system?"
Vedrig had woken from his nearly 3-day-long sleep cycle and was fizzing with energy, or at least as much so as an alien the size of Big Rig Cab could fizz. He couldn't fit into the flight deck itself, but was filling most of the corridor behind it, peering in eagerly. They were still figuring out what his colors meant in the absence of translator implants, but the medley swirling all over him was almost certainly denoted fascination and awe.
"Curiouser and curiouser," Kirk mused.
The 3 human men glanced at one another before Lewis said what they were all thinking. "So, care to tell the ignorant monkey dudes what's so special about the Aru system?" he prompted.
"It's the home of the Oma Aru, the oldest remaining civilization," Kirk said. "Nearly 200,000 Terran years old."
"So, younger than the Agrayans and the Hunters, then," Amir said.
"I'm quite certain I said civilization," Kirk replied, a touch frostily. "They're in late decline nowadays and will almost certainly be extinct within a few decades."
"Why?" Lewis said. "What happened?"
Kirk and Vedrik exchanged a glance. "We don't know," Vedrik admitted. "Species die eventually. They stop building. They stop expanding or trading. Eventually, they stop reproducing and just die out. Nobody knows why."
"Isn't that kind of a huge problem?" Lewis said. "I mean, shit, every species does this? Why isn't everyone looking for a cure?" This was met with the mutual equivalent of unknowing shrugs from the 2 aliens, who then shared another glance.
"Maybe we should look into that," Kirk admitted. "It does seem strange." "Now that you mention it, yes, it does," Vedrik agreed. "Anyway, the Omo Aru are one such species, in the last years of their existence.
So, who goes to their home system, Amir asked. Psychologists? Counselors? Suicide hotline workers?
Scavengers, picking over the artifacts, artwork, and advanced technology of the most ancient civilization in the galaxy. Exactly the sort of work where a human's brawn would come in useful, actually.
Zane nodded. Well, let's get after her then, he said. Peace, Amir said. Degaussing is going to take another 3 hours.
Zane paused. I'll go pick a bed then, he said, not bothering to say any more as he stalked out.
Amir watched him go. Something seem off about him to you? He asked Lewis. Dude, we ship with a white zebra giraffe dude with 4 arms named after a Star Trek character, a 2-ton Mr. Snuffleupagus who glows in the dark, and 2 of the most sexually frustrated badasses in human history, Lewis said. What does off even mean on this ship? Seriously, though.
Lewis glanced back down the corridor past Vedrig.
Yeah, something's off about that guy.
Date point. 4 years, 9 months, 1 week, 2 days AV. HMS Caledonia. Orbiting planet Gorai. Gowan space. Regaari.
That's... McDaniel wiped her eye. Damn it, I'm sorry. Regaari ducked his head. Please, don't be. Thank you for caring so much.
McDaniel nodded, taking a sip of her coffee to recover her composure. She was too professional to speak poorly of the Dominion while in her official capacity as an officer of the Royal Navy, but the story of how they had apathetically kicked that poor confused slave from pillar to post rather than putting her on a shuttle straight back to Gao had frankly disgusted her. How could anybody have that kind of lack of compassion? She realized that Regaari had meant 2 things by thanking her for caring.
Officer Regaari, do you know how many of our people are scattered all over the known galaxy?
I don't, he conceded. Not many, I assume.
We've managed to contact and bring home a few dozen, but there are about 3 times as many that we know for certain are dead. That still leaves more than 10,000 unaccounted for over the last 40 or 50 years.
His ears pricked up and forward. That many?
I suppose as Deathworlders we were particularly fascinating, but it's a big galaxy out there. How many stations out there, of all kinds?
I don't know exactly. Millions.
Ships? FTL capable? Ones of all sizes? Billions, easily. And sapient beings in the trillions, and that's just in and around Dominion space, which takes up, what, 1/3 of the galactic habitable ring? The whole galaxy officially, but yes, in practical terms, about 1/3. McDaniel nodded. We have an expression, a needle in a haystack. I'm familiar with it. It's an understatement. Then you see my point. We have only a tiny number of ships, and you're asking us to look for one specific needle out of thousands of needles scattered across an entire continent's worth of haystacks. Yes. You must appreciate that that's not exactly feasible. I admire Miss Chang a lot from your description of her, but I can't treat her as being any more worthwhile than any of the other abductees.
Regaari lowered his head, crestfallen.
I suspected you would say that, he said, but Ima insisted that I had to at least ask. From the way you described her, I'm surprised she's not here in person. She would be, but our cub was born just a few days ago. The timing was just wrong, so she asked me to come. Shouldn't you be there with her? I mean, your child. It doesn't work like that for us, Regaari said. We don't do it the same way you do. I'm happy. I know the little one will grow up and be an excellent Gowan, just like her mother. That's where my involvement ends.
That sounded cold and tragic to McDaniel, but she held her peace. Refraining from commenting on alien cultural differences was one of the basic rules of diplomacy.
Well, I'm sorry that I can't offer more than we're already doing, she said.
I understand, Regaari assured her.
Knowing the scale of the problem doesn't help exactly. Xiu is important to me, and the Mother Supreme has taken a personal interest in her as well. But I understand. Perspective's a bitch, isn't it?
Regaari wrinkled his nose as he interpreted the painfully literal translation of that sentiment, then gave one of those Gowan nods.
It is, he agreed, and stood. Thank you, Lieutenant. No, thank you for helping us. If nothing else, the Chang family can be told, and now that we know she's likely to be in disguise and what that disguise looks like, it might just help the search.
I hope so, Regaari agreed, keeping his private doubts private.
Please, don't let me use up any more of your time. You have a ship to run.
He stuck out a paw, keeping the wince off his face as McDaniel shook it just a little too hard. She opened the hatch for him. The two Marines waiting outside snapped to attention.
Bon voyage, officer, she said. I hope we'll have good news for you. Gentlemen, please escort our guest back to his ship.
Aye, aye. This way, sir.
Date point. 4 years, 9 months, 1 week, 2 days, AV. Scotch Creek Extraterrestrial Research Facility, British Columbia, Canada, Earth. Brigadier General Martin Tremblay. You sure about this? I don't exactly trust the Byron Group to know what they're doing. Browning my pants, but yeah, I'm sure. And they're never gonna get any better if no fucker's dumb enough to fly with them, right? Yeah, well, watch yourself out there. Our very first scout ship went missing on its first mission. The Governoress? Yeah, I know, but I'm gonna be one of a crew. That's gotta make a difference. You hope. Tremblay cleared his throat. Be careful. Damn it, Martin, I don't want to tear up. They shook hands. It didn't seem personal enough until Kevin shrugged and turned the handshake into a hug. Gonna miss you, man. Tremblay laughed a little and broke the hug. Same. Place won't be the same without your coffee and pancakes. Just don't let Maurice change the name. You've got it. Goodbye, Kevin. Thank you for everything. Take care of yourself. Tremblay sank back down into his chair and allowed himself just a moment's peace as the door shut behind Kevin, but he allowed himself no more than that. There was still a research facility to run. Date point. 4 years, 9 months, 1 week, 2 days, AV. Starship Sanctuary. Deep Space. Julian at Sicily.
Okay, your turn.
Huh?
What's your favorite movie?
It's,
Go on.
Frozen.
Please tell me you like to sing along with Let It Go.
I used to sing it on Nightmare.
Alison looked up at him in mild disbelief, then smiled delighted at the way his face was turning red.
It kept my spirits up, he explained.
She smiled and snuggled her head into his shoulder.
Oh yeah, this is going to work.
Date point. 4 years, 9 months, 2 weeks, 6 days, AV. Folctha Colony, Cimbrian. The Far Reaches. Adam Aries.
What about the mountaintop?
They're building an observatory up there.
Big Bay?
Contaminated.
Little Bay?
Contaminated last week. Come on, Sarah.
This place got boring.
Adam and Avon nodded. There were no longer any interesting knots of forest to explore, no lakes to leap into, no view that wasn't the clean-picked aftermath of the ravenous logging, and with the ballooning population of Folctha beginning to seriously tax the capacity of the colony's basic power grid, rationing had been imposed, which made Adam's PlayStation an occasional luxury, rather than a reliable source of entertainment. He'd already used up all his credits, so had the girls. A convoy of trucks bullied past the school, further mutilating the dirt road, which was already in dire need of a more permanent surface. Maybe we could go see what they're doing.
Dull.
It's something. Sarah made a disgusted noise to match her equally revolted expression.
I guess.
They jogged after the convoy, which pulled in at one of the Byron building sites at the colony's edge, a promised starport, currently an industrial mangrove swamp of cranes and scaffolding, putting their roots down in excavated but unfilled foundations. The kids lined up at the chain-link fence, peering between the corporate holdings and safety notices, taking it in. The artist's impressions certainly looked pretty, but for now, this was just another eyesore. It was hard to imagine how one could become the other. With nothing better to do, they just stood there and watched the workers fan out across the construction site, picking up where they had left off the previous night.
Guess they're pouring the foundations today, Sarah commented, pointing at a family of cement trucks that were entering the site from the other side, reversing up to one of the foundations, which was basically just a pit filled with a welded industrial cage of rebar.
Adam frowned. So, what's that guy doing? He asked. He didn't point, but managed to indicate with the direction of his gaze which worker he was referring to. He hadn't practiced crowd watching since leaving Earth, but the skill was apparently stuck with him. It wasn't just that the guy wasn't with all the others, it was that he seemed to be carefully keeping some concealment between himself and his colleagues.
Maybe he's sloping off for a fag break, Sarah asked.
When Adam and Ava gave her a strange look, she sighed,
Cigarette!
The lone worker found somewhere he was apparently satisfied with, and pulled a brick-sized object of some description from inside his high-vis jacket, which he promptly stuffed into a cement mixer.
That didn't look like a cigarette, Ava commented.
I don't like this. I'm calling my dad, Adam said.
Are you sure about that? I mean, maybe we should find out what it is first, Sarah said.
No. If it's a false alarm, it's no big deal, but if it's dangerous, we should let the FCPA handle it, Adam said firmly. Cell phone coverage in Folctha was at least ubiquitous. The colony was far too small, flat, and open for that to be an issue, and Gabriel answered on the third ring.
Hey, amigo!
Dad, we're down by the Byron Spaceport site. There's somebody down here acting real suspicious.
I'm on my way,
Gabriel said. Adam grinned, relieved and delighted that his dad trusted his instincts so implicitly.
What's he up to?
He slipped away from other workers and hid something in a cement mixer. Could be a drugs drop.
How big is something?
About the size of a big cell phone, I guess. Adam shrugged off a tap on his shoulder.
Right, keep an eye on him, but don't get too close, okay? I need to hang up and get down. Oh shit,
Adam swore as he glanced around in response to the increasingly urgent tap on the shoulder, just in time to see Sarah's boots wriggle out of sight under the fence. He rushed to the fence.
Sarah, what the fuck are you doing?
She raised her camera.
Getting a picture of the guy in case he slips away. Sarah!
She ducked behind a pile of girders.
Sarah, for fuck's sake, get back here!
Adam hissed as loudly as he dared. She didn't reappear. Oh God, Dad, Sarah just went in there. She's trying to get a picture of the guy. To his horror, he saw the guy who dropped the whatever it was in the machine pause and glance back, clearly having caught some movement out of the corner of his eye. A second later, he began to march purposefully back towards the mixer, tugging something from the back of his jeans. There was something both wrong and familiar about the way he held it, though. Something in the way he moved. Something that flashed him right back to a roller derby in San Diego. Dad, he said, his voice becoming too calm, too flat, as if his subconscious knew how critical it was to speak clearly now, despite the dryness in his mouth and the pummeling in his chest. The guy just pulled a gun, and he's walking like Mr. Johnson did.
Mierda, Adam, please don't do anything stupid, okay?
Sarah's in there.
Mantener la cama. You go after her and you'll just give him more hostages, and maybe victims.
Adam nodded and swallowed. Entiendo. Hurry.
Estoy coleando. I love you.
Gabriel hung up. The phone rang.
Powell? Powell, it's Addis. Possible hierarchy at the spaceport site. Armed. One of the kids is in there.
Powell didn't even respond. He just dropped the handset and rushed for the door, erupting from it in a whirlwind of screamed orders.
Gear up! Jones, get me the ATVs this second!
Legsy, who never went by Jones unless the situation was beyond dire, practically teleported in his haste to obey. They were mounted and moving in less than a minute.
We've got possible hierarchy at the spaceport construction site,
Powell yelled over the engines, performing his weapons checks as they went.
At least one child mixed up in it, possibly hostage, so check your fire. We're going for live capture if possible, but keeping the child alive is priority number 1. Be aware of other workers in the area. We're going to be checking them once the kid's secure. Don't let your fucking guard down.
Satisfied his gun was in working order, he hopped off the ATV as it slid to a halt only a few dozen meters from the site.
If there's any questions, make them fucking quick, he said.
There were none. Silent as ghosts, quick as nightmares, they stormed the construction yard. Oh, God! Ava was suddenly animated, pale and shedding distraught tears. Oh, God, he's gonna find her! What? She's hiding in those cement bags over there! Adam didn't have time to get to the fence and see which ones she meant before he was paralyzed by the firecracker popping of gunfire and the sound of Ava's anguished scream. Armored, armed, and ready to kick ass was one thing, but knowing there were kids in danger and hearing the gunfire had rooted even the SBS team to the spot for just an instant. Fuck! Go! In the next instant, they exploded from amongst the construction and equipment. Their quarry turned and raised his gun towards the first flash of movement. An unseen trooper crashed into him from behind, disarming and restraining him in one smooth motion. Neutralized! Find the kid! His men fanned out, calling out for the girl. Powell didn't need to. The second he stopped and listened, he heard her. He stuck his head over a stack of cement bags. The girl was whimpering and weeping. She was covered in white cement dust, and there was a smear of horribly familiar red around where she was cradling her side. Ross! Powell grabbed the bags and heaved, spilling them everywhere as he dug her out. The girl was small, brown-haired, skinny. The only clean spot on her was where her tears had washed away a pink track in the cement dust, revealing a few freckles. There was a lot of blood, and it was staining her mouth as she sobbed. Hey, we've got you, okay? He said, taking her hand. Ross was already joining him, pulling stuff from his bag. You're safe now. We'll get you fixed. Her grip was weak and trembling. She whispered something to him. Scared? Powell was used to death. He had seen men and women die, often by his own hand, some so close that he could feel their last breath. He had lost comrades in action, seen what modern weaponry could do to a human being. He had seen death take all kinds of people. He thought he had seen it take children. He had seen enough sad little corpses. But never like this. When he closed her eyes, her tears soaked his glove. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I am the Casual Deathworlder, your host, and this has been the conclusion of The Deathworlders, Chapter 19. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you did, please consider dropping a like and maybe a comment, perhaps sharing the video with a friend. And if you haven't done so already, maybe consider subscribing. As always, huge shout out to my editor, Graygor. Thank you very much, buddy. I could not do this without you. Okay, yeah, this was an emotional one, and that last part was kind of hard to read. I actually had to stop a couple of times. Yeah, this is where the hierarchy really screwed up, and this is really going to galvanize mankind. More so than the destruction of an entire city. And the logic behind that will actually be explained later. But in the meantime, let's see. Question. Who's got the question? Okay. Cerebral implants. We are actually getting to the point where we can do certain types of cerebral implants. Some that can restore sight, some that can add a little bit to your cognitive ability. I know Musk is working on something like that. What are your thoughts? What do you think some of the potential pitfalls are? Leave your answers in the comments down below. In the meantime, I will see you all in the next one. Be well, be safe. I love you all. Bye-bye.